How did Finland end up being labeled the most racist country in the European Union? The claim comes from this study, Being Black in the EU. And I want to show you something. Look at this. The report places Finland at the very top for perceived racist harassment. According to it, 63% of respondents in Finland said they'd experienced harassment within the last 5 years that they believed was racist. I read the entire report because I wanted to understand what it was actually saying. So the central question of this video is simple. Is it true? Did the study even claim Finland is the most racist country in Europe? And is being black in the EU reliable enough to draw that conclusion? The media certainly thought so. Headlines, statements from human rights organizations, outrage, and look, I'm black, living in Finland, so I want to know what's true. We're going to break down how the study was done, what the numbers actually mean, and what the study was actually built to do. And then we'll figure out whether Finland deserves that label. Let's start at the beginning. The report comes from an EU agency called the FRA, the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights. Their role is to monitor how people in the EU are being treated and advise governments. They're not law enforcers, more like observers whispering suggestions from the back of the room. Here's the first major point. Being Black in the EU is not its own survey. It was pulled from a much larger survey called EUMIDIS 2. That original survey interviewed around 25,000 people across Europe from many different minority groups: Roma, Muslims, Jews, immigrants, and more. From this huge data set, the FRA filtered out people who appeared to be of African descent. Europe doesn't track race, so they used country of birth of the person or their parents as a substitute. So this was not a survey specifically designed to study African people in Europe. It was a filtered subset. Once filtered, we're left with 5,803 respondents across Europe. Every chart and statistic comes from this number. One of those charts, the one everyone screenshots, shows racist harassment in the last 5 years. On this chart, Finland is right at the top. And I want you to notice the word perceived. Put that in your pocket. We're coming back to that. What does count as harassment in the survey? Rude gestures, offensive comments, inappropriate staring, occasionally threatening words. That's the foundation of the harassment numbers. Now, out of the 5,803 respondents, only about 500 to 600 were from Finland. And in 2016, Finland had around 50,000 people of African descent living in the country, which means when you survey 500 out of 50,000, each response represents, well, a lot of people. This is called weighting. Weighting isn't bad by itself. It's standard in research, but small samples can magnify any imbalance. If your sample is tiny and not randomly selected, each person gets a very large megaphone, which can completely distort the results. Two more details matter. First, across all 5,803 respondents, about 30% said they'd experienced some form of racist harassment in the last 5 years. Among those people, nearly 40% of incidents weren't from white Europeans at all. Second, this dataset does not cover all 28 countries. Only 12 countries were included in this report. Entire regions, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Romania, aren't part of the comparison. So the famous chart isn't comparing Finland to Europe. It's comparing Finland to 11 other countries. Quick pause in the video. If you are enjoying this video, leave me a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to support me further, consider buying me a coffee. I'll leave a link in the description below. I hope you appreciate the work I put into this. I had to read this bloody study. It was really, really boring. But anyway, back to the video. If you read the study, one thing jumps out at you. The FRA constantly warns that many results are based on very small numbers and may be statistically unreliable. Weighting only works when the people you're weighting are a smaller, balanced version of the real population.
A better example of this would be like the labor force survey Finland does every so often, because everyone in the data set is connected by a simple idea. You either work, don't work, or you're laid off. It doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter what city, you're just connected by that simple idea, and that's it.
But in this study, the African descent category is not a unified group. You have Somalis, Nigerians, Congolese, South Africans, first-generation refugees, second-generation immigrants, international students, and highly skilled professionals, all treated as if they represent one single community. When you weight a sample like that, you're not amplifying an accurate miniature of the population, you're amplifying the imbalance inside the sample. Because the EU doesn't track race, researchers couldn't randomly select people of African descent. So they went out looking for them. Where? In immigrant-dense neighborhoods, community organizations, integration centers, and they took referrals. These methods overrepresent people who are newer to the country or live in isolated communities. If out of 500 participants, 200 were first-generation Somali refugees living in tight-knit immigrant communities, 50 were Nigerian professionals, 20 were second-generation immigrants of African background, and the rest were scattered across several other countries and situations. That is not a balanced reflection of the 50,000 African descent residents living in Finland. But in this study, that unbalanced sample would still be treated as if it represents everyone. But without knowing the subgroup breakdown, we can't judge whether the sample reflects the actual population. Even if all of that weren't an issue, the entire harassment statistic rests on one word: perceived. These numbers are not verified. No police reports, no documents. One rude encounter counts the same as years of targeted harassment. The study admits this, but often drops the word perceived when presenting the results, as though it was presenting rock-solid facts. Let's look at the opening lines of the report. It is a reality both shameful and infuriating. Racism remains a pervasive scourge throughout the European Union. People of African descent face widespread and entrenched prejudice and exclusion. This is advocacy language, not neutral analysis. Most people, won't read the full report. They'll read the headline or statements from NGOs, which often repeat the forward's emotional framing, not the caution inside the data. Meanwhile, the study openly admits small samples, non-random recruitment, unverified incidents, perception-based questions, statistically unreliable results. The intention behind the survey was likely good, but the methodology can't carry the weight of the conclusions. So, is Finland the most racist country in the EU? No, the study doesn't prove that. It can't. Not only because the methodology is fragile, not only because the harassment results are based on perception, not only because the sample was tiny and non-random, but because the report didn't even include all EU countries. You can't call Finland the most racist country in the EU when half the EU wasn't represented or even surveyed. What is Finland actually like? If you're new to this country, Finnish people and Finnish culture can be strange. The culture shock can hit you in the face. The language is alien. The social cues are different. I admit, people like to be left alone. They'll only sit next to you on a bus if they absolutely have to. And talking to you is the same. Even though most Finns can speak English, many are shy about it. Others just avoid it entirely. And when they do talk, they're very direct. Small talk is not a national sport here. If you come from a place like I did, South Africa, where people are outwardly warm, loud, and expressive and inviting, Finns can seem unsmiling and uninviting, at least when you don't know the culture. Personal space is sacred. Silence is normal. Not approaching you is often a sign of respect, not hostility. A lot of things that first feel rude aren't rude at all. Most people here just want to live their lives in peace. So not coming to sit next to you, not starting a conversation, giving you space, those are acts of politeness in this culture. So when a survey is done, mostly among first-generation immigrants who probably live in immigrant communities, are still figuring out how this place works, I'm not surprised that some people had encounters they perceived as racist. That's literally what the survey is built to capture: perceptions. As someone from South Africa, the things that this study tries to pass off as racism are honestly absurd to me. I'm not saying someone can't look at you in a racist way. Of course they can. But really? We're measuring staring now? That's the bar? And here's something the study touches on very briefly. Finland consistently ranks amongst the highest in the world for trust in the police, including among immigrants. People here trust the police will treat them fairly, that the legal system is equal. This matters because countries with high institutional trust tend to have less actual discrimination, not more. And here in Finland, we are all equal under the law. Overt racism is condemned loudly by most Finns. People genuinely hate racism. They don't care about the color of your skin, but they do care about culture. If you reject the culture, they will reject you. And that has nothing to do with race. They'll reject a rude Brit, a rude Nigerian, a rude Somali, a rude Argentinian. It doesn't matter. I've lived in Finland for over 6 years. This is a generous country. It takes care of its people. And if you live here, you're living with more opportunity and better quality of life than most people on the planet. That doesn't mean racism doesn't exist. It does, everywhere, including here. But studies like this miss the most important part of integration. They bring their own assumptions about race, often shaped by American thinking, and try to force fit the model onto Europe. This study is not useless. It reveals something, but not what it thinks it does. To me, it shows just how little the European Union understands about the real immigration and integration challenges happening right now. Trying to boil all of that down to race is a mistake. So no, Finland is not the most racist country in the EU. It's a beautiful country full of beautiful people. Thank you for watching. Signing off, a black person in the EU. Ciao.